All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Kilayim. We are starting the Ezras Hashem Perek Zayin Halacha Aleph. We are learning today Daf Samach Aleph, right on the top of the Amid by the new Mishnah, and we're going to introduce the halacha of Hamavrich es Hagefen. And as we mentioned when we made the siyum of the 6th chapter yesterday, that this Mishnah is actually quoted a lot in Chassidus in the context of, and it's going to give us a better insight in the idea that throughout davening, we sometimes bless Hashem mamish. Al derech, we have Bavli Brachas Dav Zayin, where the Oibishter, so to say, Kavi Yochel, asked Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol, right, to bless him, and he made a tefillah. And how is it possible for us to bless Hashem when we are the recipients? God is the provider. Hashem is the mashpia. And the nukuda that we have in Chassidus is that the word bracha doesn't mean to give something that Hashem doesn't have, because Hashem has it all, but it comes from the lashon hamavrich es hagefen. And hamavrich es hagefen, as we'll go in a moment in greater detail, it's a certain technique that's used concerning a vineyard, that when you have vines and you want for a particular vine to create, so to say, a new offshoot, you bend it down. The word mavrich literally means to kneel. When a person kneels, they go down. You bring a vine down, actually all the way under the ground, and you have it come up in a different location, in a new location. And since a big part of the branch is under the ground, the branch itself becomes roots, or from the branch grows out roots for this new offshoot. And that's the meaning, that being that Hashem wanted for us to choose to have him here, for us to make a home for him, so the Oibishter, so it's really up to us. And when we do so, Ki'ilu, we are drawing God down. The Oibishter is here, but in a concealed way from our perspective. When we choose to make this world into a home for Hashem, so then even from our perspective, Hashem becomes revealed here. And that's the meaning of a bracha. And that's actually the whole project of creation, was Hashem created something in which we choose him, instead of him just being as he always is in all other realities. So that's Hamavrich es Hagefen. Now, here is the big din of the Mishnah. Don't forget, whether the parent vine, right, and the offshoot vine, whether they are part of a vineyard, whether they are halachically considered an individual vine, all of the rules that we learned before apply. So let's, for example, if it's part of a vineyard, obviously to plant any foreign seed, you will have to distance, you have to make a gap of the avodah of 4 amas. Only after that can you plant a foreign seed. If it's a gefen yechidi, even though we learn Shitas Rabbi Akiva, we learn Shitas Rabbi Shmuel, let's go with the halach. You have to have 6 tefachim. Now appreciate, my friends, that it's possible that you will have a location that's 6 tefachim away from the original vine, a location on the ground that's still 6 tefachim away from the area that the new vine is coming out of the ground. And just to make something very clear, that the measurement of 6 tefachim, which is from the trunk of the vine, from which part of the trunk of the vine, from the place where it emerges from the ground. Remember that. When you measure 6 tefachim, you are not measuring it from where you know the roots are underground. It's not shaykh, it's not relevant. You measure it from where it breaks through the ground. That's from where you measure it. So if you have the original vine to your right, and you layered it means you bend it into the ground, and it traveled under the ground, let's just say for 18 tefachim, mamish, it traveled a couple of amas away from the other, or more, we'll see later. Today, we're going to quote today, a Mishnah we'll learn tomorrow. It traveled 5 amas away. That means it came out of the ground 5 amas away from the parent vine. Each one now is a vine for itself. In between it, there'll be plenty locations where you're more than 6 tefachim away from the parent vine. You're more than 6 tefachim away from the offshoot, from the new vine. So it's meeting the rule. You're not within 6 tefachim. Now we're going to learn a new halach, that you may not plant foreign seed above the layered vine, directly above the vine, while that vine is under the ground, or over the part of the vine that really will remain under the ground, unless only if the vine under the ground is 3 tfachim deep or more. But if the layered vine is less than 3 tfachim below the surface, that's the main halach of our Mishnah, you may not plant foreign seed directly above it. And the question is why? The Mishnah does not say why. And guys, I know this is an introduction, so it's almost like I'm taking away the whole fun, because I'm giving you a heads up of what's going to be at the end. Obviously, when we begin, we're learning Kilei Akedem, that's the Hemshech, right? So we think it's because it's Kalayim. No, it's not going to be connected with the law of Kalayim. It will not be connected. Even if it's less than 3 tfachim below the surface, the only issue of our Mishnah is the issue of Harkava. So now we're reviewing a halacha that we never really jumped into great detail, and that is you're not allowed to graft any plant in a tree. And by the way, any tree is not only a vine, but we are speaking about a vine, and as it will become clear at the end of today's daf, that what is unique with the layered branch under the ground is that it's very soft vis-a-vis other roots of other trees, that a plant doesn't have the capacity of penetrating into it, which is the meaning of grafting. Grafting is when one plant goes into another tree, a tree. So aside of the vine being a grapevine, take away the fact that it's grapes. It's also a tree. I know we don't make what bracha do you make for a grape? By the priya eitz. So the vart of the Mishnah will be is that when does the foreign seed have the power to protrude into, to penetrate into the layered vine under the ground? Number one, it's only if it's within 3 tfachim. And number two, only if the foreign seed is planted directly above it. But if the foreign seed is planted a little bit to the side, since as it will become clear, the issue is not that under the ground they're going to be close to each other. That's not the issue. The issue is only an issue of grafting, of harkava. Plants have their roots grow directly down, and they will not be able to penetrate from the side. That will be the final understanding of the big rule that we are learning today. And then we're going to have a couple of details. The Mishnah will speak about, and the words will be, when you have a knee in a grapevine, and we'll explain that case all in the context of when a vine is coming out of the ground. Sometimes it comes straight up. But sometimes, for some reason, the moment it goes above the ground, on the ground itself, directly above, it travels horizontally on the ground for whatever space it is. Let's say it travels for 2 feet, and then it bends up and it grows up. That's called the knee in a vine. And since we mentioned that the general halach of 6 tfachim or of 4 amas is not from the part of the vine that's under the ground, it's only from the part of the vine that's breaking above the surface. We're going to learn in our Mishnah that even though it broke above the surface, in yard aleph, but since it traveled on the ground and it only began to go up a couple of feet away, you begin counting the 6 tfachim or the 4 amas from those few feet away, from the part that's going upwards and not from the part that's breaking above the surface, because the eye doesn't see it because it's going above the ground, as we'll see pictures and will be more clarified. We're going to end up quoting today already the next Mishnah that we'll learn, God willing, on Daf Samach Beis. Think about it. When we speak about the din of Mavrich, what happens if you have 3 vines, only 3 vines, and the owner of these vines decided at some point to layer all 3 of them? So he bent them down and he really created a new road. He went underground. Now, of course, it has to fit within the rules of a kedem. What's the rule of a kedem? That the rows have to be 4 amas or more, not closer, and under 8 amas. Fine. But if, let's say, you made this layer technique under the ground for 5 amas and the 3 came up, you should know now you have a real kedem because you have 2 rows, the parent vine and the new vine, Each one is considered a vine for itself. Gewaldig. Chevre, mamash ashreinu. Because I'm saying for me, we learn hamavrich hasagefen, hamavrich hasagefen.
Rabbi, excuse me. So
yes.
So there is three vines on the surface and two below. Did I understand it right? Like
no. The case I mentioned at the end, Yakir, is if you have three normal vines above the surface, and you, the owner, the balabas of the kerem, you want to layer all three of them. So you should know that if you do it properly meaning that the vines are very long, that you allowed the layered part, the part under the ground, to go 4 amas to 8 amas, and only there does it go above the ground. Now you're going to have a kerem. Why will you have a kerem? Because a kerem is 2 rows. Really, it can be 3 and 2. For sure, 3 and 3. Even though, really, it's the same vine, you would argue. Not that you didn't cut anything. Since they are layered and they come above the ground, they are already viewed as a separate vine. Okay. Says the Holy Mishnah. I know many people, it's Yeshiva week. Yeshiva week means to learn less for some reason, but it's important for everyone to really get this daf. For this introduction. So this owner is using the technique of mavrich, or in English, it's called layering. And the vine that's under the ground doesn't necessarily go deep under the ground. It was common for it to be layered beneath the surface, a tefach or 2. In other words, less than 3 tefachim. So says the Mishnah, that's the big rule. That im ein ofar al gaba shloisha tefachim. That if it's not layered 3 tefachim or more, if it's a drop less than 3 tefachim, says the Mishnah, you may not introduce any foreign seed directly above the layered branch under the ground. And as I already gave everyone the maskana to make it clear, but I want to repeat one nakuda, that I may not plant foreign seed if it's a kerem within daladamas is a given, has nothing to do with layering. If it's not yet a halachic kerem or others, so you have the avoid of 6 tefachim, of course we already know you're not allowed to plant foreign seed within 6 tefachim, but we covered that. There's going to be areas where it's away 6 tefachim. And when we say 6 tefachim, not only 6 tefachim away from the parent vine. If I put it under the ground for a couple of amas, there'll be plenty of space in between the old parent vine and the new offshoot above the ground, that you can put something in the middle and you have more than 6 tefachim from either side. That's what the Mishnah is talking about. No, it's when it meets all of the criteria that we learned above. Now comes a new halach. Still, there'll be a prohibition to plant the seed directly above the layered branch if the layered branch is not 3 tefachim or more under the ground. If it's 3 tefachim or more, you can plant it directly above it. But if it's less than 3 tefachim and ain't offer al gaba shloisha tefachim, you may not do that. You may not do that. And again, everyone already knows over here that it has nothing to do with kilei hakerem, as we'll see. Has to do with the din of harkava. And a geffen is an eitz. And I may not graft, insert a branch of any plant, inside the trunk of any tree. I'm not allowed to do that. Whether it's in the trunk, whether it's in a branch. You can't graft plants and trees. Geffen is a tree. And like we mentioned, it's unique because it's very soft. These vines, even though they're under the ground, and even though they're forming into roots, still softer than other trees. And if there isn't 3 tefachim of earth, what you plant only directly over it will penetrate into it. Now, another detail. When farmers or vineyard owners, when they would layer, many times what they would do is that they would use a dried out gourd or actually a pipe, and they would put the layered vine under the ground in the pipe. So says the Mishnah that afilu hivricha, even if this layered part of the vine that's traveling under the ground is traveling through the dalas, this dried out gourd, which was commonly used, they would dry out a gourd and it would become an area into which they would put the vine. or in an actual sea line, in an actual pipe. Now we're going to speak clearly, not about a metal pipe. We're speaking about dafka, a earthenware pipe, cheres, which was the common material that was used. They are not strong enough to separate the roots of the plant, stopping them from penetrating into the vine. The root will go through the gourd, it's going to go through the pipe and into the root, and you got harkava. However, says the Mishnah, 1 second, but if hivricha bisela, but if the person used a rock, now it doesn't mean that they found a hollowed rock. It doesn't work that way. A rock means, chavra, let's say I'm the guy, I'm putting the vine 2 tefachim under the ground. Happens to be that it's a very rocky ground. And when you go 1 tefach under the ground, there's a tefach of earth, then there's a big rock under the ground. So if I put the vine, the layered vine, under the rock, I put it under the rock, then you are allowed to plant any foreign seed directly above it, over the rock, even though you don't have 3 tefachim, because the rock, that's the whole part, the rock will stop the roots of the plant from being able to reach the vine. And there we say, if there's only 3 fingers, there has to be at least 3 fingers. Imagine how powerful nature is. That means if you don't have 3 fingers, then
3 fingers of afa or of a sela, of a rock.
No, of earth, of earth.
Yeah.
And just to know how in halacha, whenever we speak about a finger breadth, we're speaking about the finger, the width of a thumb. That's the general rule. Okay, so a tefach is 4 of these. And 3 is less than a tefach. You have to have a minimum amount of earth above the rock. If you have only shalosh boys, since there is a rock, muter lahavi zera olehom. Beautiful. That's the main halach of the Mishnah. But since you have to chop that, hold on, how can I plant any zera? How can I plant zera? There's a vine here. The answer is because I already have the distance of 6 tefachim, let's say, which means that from where do you count the 6 tefachim? Not from the roots, because it's traveling. You count the 6 tefachim from where the vine breaks above the surface. So now that you got that, now if whoever has a picture will appreciate the second law of the Mishnah, which is a side law, that if there is a knee in the grapevine, so if you can see the picture, you'll notice that you have to the right, you have the vine going above the ground. But the moment it goes above the ground, it's not that it goes up an inch. No, the moment it goes above the surface, for some reason, this vine made a sharp 90-degree angle turn, and it's sitting on the surface. It's going for however long you want it to go. And at some point, it turns back up vertically. So from where do you count the 6 tefachim? Or from where do you count the daladamis? From the knee, from where it goes above the surface, not from where it broke out from the ground. Second trunk, not from the trunk that's in the ground, but from the trunk that goes up in the ear. That's it.
So
we got the mission, guys.
How tall are we talking about? Because one may assume the bud does have a minimum height where you say, okay, that grows. Because how could you predict whether it's gonna turn to the right and then gonna go up high?
That's the whole point. The point is that the moment. The point is that you don't. When I said the words, which is correct, that from where do you measure the 6 tefachim? From where do you measure the daladamis? From where? From where it breaks the surface. Not exactly, says the Mishnah. You have to tweak it. It's not really only from where it breaks the surface. It's never underneath the surface, but it's from where it begins to go up. So if you have a metzias where it broke the surface, but it didn't go up because right above the surface, it went a 90 angle and it traveled underground, you only measured the 6 tefachim from where it began to go up, from where it becomes vertical. You don't count if it broke the surface and it went horizontal, you don't count it from there. So Yakir, if it only broke above the ground now and it's traveling horizontal, I don't know where to measure yet. I don't know yet. I have to wait for it to decide where it's going to start to go to the heavens.
I guess my only question is, how do you know? How can you predict when it's gonna turn? It might even grow.
You can't. I don't know how to predict. And who does? Why would you have to? Why do you need to predict? Don't predict anything.
In order to measure.
Wait until it turns up. When it turns up, when you start measuring. Prior to turning up, you don't do anything there. You don't know where it's going. Okay. Says the Gemara. Since the Mishnah, you see the whole challenge they had in the yeshivas, and they learned this Mishnah, right? We're learning the behemshech to Ezeu Aris. We're learning it behemshech basically to Karachas Akerem, to all of these purakim, all about Kilei Akerem. So everyone understands in the flow that this is a din of not planting foreign seed near a vineyard. If the issue is near, why did the Mishnah limit the prohibition to directly above the layered branch? Why? And if it's not directly above it, if it's a centimeter off to either side, it should not make a difference. And Bachlal, we already learned that we don't care about anything that's happening under 3 tvachim. But here it's not 3 tvachim. That's the whole vart. So asks the Gemara, or it points out the Gemara, since the Mishnah says, Lo yavi zera oleha, the problem is planting a foreign seed on top of the layered vine. That implies hamenatzad is mutter. Hamenatzad is mutter, even though you don't have 3 tvachim, even though the layered vine is less than 3 tvachim. And I'm putting it on the side. Even if you measure from there, there's no 3 tvachim. You are allowed to do it. And the question is, why would you be allowed to do it? So says the Gemara, man nan kaimin. What is the iser that we are referring to? If it's because of grafting, and the Gemara jumps to grafting, because if it's an issue of proximity to a geffen, first of all, the shear is 6 tvachim. The shear is 6 tvachim. Where do we get to 3 tvachim? So it has to be grafting. The problem is, what difference does it make if it's directly above it, if it's a little bit on the side, or better? I'm sorry, Gemara has another question. If it's an issue of grafting, why are we learning this with geffen? Why don't we learn this with any other tree? Chavra, I'm not allowed to graft any plant in the roots of any tree. I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not allowed to graft it in the roots. I'm not allowed to put it in the trunk. I cannot put it in the branches. So if the issue is you plant a seed and the seed is going to protrude downwards and it's going to go into it, so imishum zeroyim be'ilan, which is grafting, lamali gefen, afilu shar kol ilan. So therefore, the Gemara in the beginning says it can't be grafting. It has to be a din of kalayim. Kalayim means you can't plant a foreign seed within the proximity, whether it's 6 tvachim, whether it is 4 amas. But imishum avoida, don't we know that the avoida is 6? In other words, the Gemara is open to the possibility. Until now, when we spoke about avoida was above the surface, either 4 amas by a kerem or 6 tvachim by a geffen yechid. So the Gemara says, maybe it means that the din of 6 tvachim of the avoida isn't only horizontal, it's also down vertical. That if it's within 6 tvachim from down, since you put the layer under the ground, so it should be 6 tvachim. Now, the only solution for that was Rabbi Akiva. Look how the Gemara went. Because don't forget, we learned in the previous chapter. I know the Gemara quoted the Braisa with Rabbi Yishmael, but we learned in the Mishnah that Rabbi Akiva holds that avoid of geffen yechid is only 3 tvachim. So Elot must be Rabbi Akiva, that Rabbi Akiva Amar Shloisha. Guys, we're gonna refute this. Why are we gonna refute this? Because if that's the pshat in the Mishnah, and indeed our Mishnah was following Rabbi Akiva, it's almost like the Stam Mishnah. The Rebbe was soisim, machloikes v'charkach Stam. You can make a whole Torah. Is because Rabbeinu HaKadosh paskins like Rabbi Akiva. So it's a given. No, ik Rabbi Akiva, afilu minat sad nitnei shloisha. Here's the problem. So then that's the whole beginning of the Gemara. Why did the Mishnah say lo yavi zera oleha? Why oleha? If we're going to learn that the din of avoida isn't only above the ground horizontally, it also includes vertically down. So then, if it's on the side, if it's within 3 tvachim, so the branch is 2 tvachim below the ground. Let's say it's 2 tvachim below the ground. Something directly above it is only 2 tvachim away. Something 2 fingers away is 2.5 tefach. Really, it's less. So it's still going to be usher. No, it's the criteria should be whichever way you measure, it has to be 3 tvachim away from the branch under the ground. And then that's the challenge. So what is the whole din of Amavrech Hasagefen? Turning to Daf Samachala from it base, and the Gemara therefore says, number one, avoida only above the ground. Whether it's 4 ames, whether it's 6 tvachim, whether it's 3 tvachim, going down has nothing to do with avoid. Nothing to do with avoid. It has to do with grafting. Rabbi Yirmiyah, Daf Samachala from the base on the top, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yirmiyah b'shem Rabbi Chia bar Abba, that it mishum zeroyim al gabe gefen. It's imagine there was so mekatzed in the Gemara. So number one, there's no issue of close proximity below the ground. Doesn't exist. The only issue is grafting. And what was the Gemara's kasha? Why did you speak about gefen? That's the answer. The answer is that don't think that any root of any tree is subject to allowing itself getting penetrated from any seed of a plant that you planted above it. Not so simple. But when you have karta, when you have 2 things working against you, number one, what's under the ground is a vine. The vine is the most delicate, most susceptible. In the hagefen, right? That's the influence for good and bad that we have on our children. In other words, what you put above goes into it. But when is it able to penetrate the vine beneath the ground? Only if it's directly above it. The moment it's abyssal minatzad, even though it's a vine that's soft, it will not allow itself to get penetrated. Gavaldik, mamish gavaldik. So all other trees you can plant directly above the roots, directly above what's under the ground. Even the vine on the side you could. Okay. Now, let me word it like this. I mean, I said it doesn't. Guys, when you plant a seed on the side, why doesn't it penetrate? Why not? Because the roots of plants, I know we learned the pia, that's an exception. But without the exception, when you plant anything in the ground, the ikir of the roots go down. They don't go to the side. Because if they would go ikir to the side, what difference would it make? And now, based on that premise, the Gemara has a kasha. No, on the side you could, because the roots of this zera, they go down. If they go a little bit to the side, it wouldn't go into the roots. It wouldn't go into the layered vine. It goes down. We learn a Mishnah. What's the Mishnah? They were speaking about a wall that belongs to you, and I own the property directly on the other side of the wall, and there are certain activities that I am not allowed to do in very close proximity to your wall because it's going to ruin your wall. Says the Holy Mishnah, what are those? The Mishnah gives 3 cases. Marchikin, I have to distance es hazroim, if I'm planting anything, or ve'es hamacharesha, if I'm plowing the plow, or ve'es meiraglaim, if someone wants to urinate, min hakoisel, 3 tvachim. Now, in other words, if not, if it's within 3 tvachim, it's going to weaken the foundations of the wall. So Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar, I want you to know that Rab Chama bar Ukva Makshe, he put together these 2 Mishnahs together. He was the one that, come on, over there in Bava Basra, at Amar, you're saying, Ein hasharoshim mahalchim min atzad. I take it back. Over there means by us. In Kalayim, the problem is only all leho. Why? Because if he planted to the side, the roots go straight down. They don't go to the side. If they don't go to the side, I'm not talking about the macharesha. I'm not talking about meiraglaim. I'm talking about the first case of the Mishnah of Zeroyim. Why am I not allowed to plant Zeroyim right next to your wall? Why not? The roots of my Zeroyim will go directly down. They're not going to weaken your foundation. In other words, we're saying that the roots of my Zeroyim will weaken the foundation of the wall. So answers the Gemara, and the answer is so powerful, the Gemara is going to wonder what was even the kasha. Which, by the way, that's the best answer. The best answer is where your mamish took away the question. Amar Rabbi Yosi, listen here. Kan v'kan, no contradiction. Ein hashiroshin mahalchim min atzad. Everyone agrees. Roots, when they go under the ground from all plants, with an exception, but as a rule, they go directly down. They don't go sideways. But let's think about it. Me and you, me on your wall. I have land and you have a wall. If I put a zera, let's say 1 tefach away from your wall, the shirashim will go under straight. But that earth will become weak. If the earth near your wall becomes weakened in the ground, becomes softened, then the foundation of your wall becomes weakened as well. Many people, when they build, you'll see that not under the wall, away, you build a swimming pool in the ground. A couple of feet away, they build a big wall to hold the earth, because once you dig in the ground here, of course, it weakens it directly underneath it. It weakens it from the sides also. It's about weakening the earth. If the earth is weak, then how is the wall being held in the ground if the ground itself became weakened? It makes the earth soft directly underneath it. Well, if the earth near the wall in the bottom, under the ground, is weak, don't think it's in a vacuum. So then the earth near it is also weakened. Everything begins to move. It will damage the wall's foundation. Roots tunnel only downward. They only loosen the earth downward. But when the earth is loosened down, it has an effect on the shachin. We affect each other. And more than that, says Rabbi Yossi, I'll prove it to you. That what? That the foundation could be damaged even if the earth was loosened in a distance. Now, I know the distance is less than 3 tvachim. That the foundation of the wall could be damaged even though the earth is not under the wall. It's near the wall. How do I know that? Because we learned in that same Mishnah, Meiraglaim. The Tanin and Taman Meiraglaim. Now, we all know because of gravity, when a person will urinate on the ground, where does the urine go down? It goes straight down. It doesn't go to the sides. So what's the problem? That's the problem. The problem is it goes straight down. And if within 3 tvachim from the wall, the earth there becomes weak, everything becomes weak around it. Of course not. So just like by Meiraglaim, it goes down. When it comes to the weakening of a foundation of the wall, that is also problematic. That explains the Mishnah Bava Basra. The Gemara says, I'll tell you more. And not only did you give a good answer, I don't understand you. You're only bringing from Meiraglaim. The Mishnah gave only 3 dinim. Zroim, Macharesha, and Meiraglaim. What about Macharesha? When I have a plow, the plow goes on, the plow, Begashmias, goes straight down. The plow doesn't go to the sides. So you see from the Mishnah, it's not about going to the sides. So what were you even asking? Not only did you bring a proof from Meiraglaim, it's worse than that. It's better, but it's worse. You see from Meiraglaim goes down, but it's an issue with the wall. But you see the same thing with Macharesha. No, the fork of the plow goes straight down. So you see, a wall is different. You need for the earth around the sides of the foundations of the wall to be rock hard. If the earth only under, even minatzad, by the wall, you got a problem. Coming back over here, not so when it comes to the koyach of a root to penetrate that which is underground. 2 things. Number 1, only a vine. And number 2, only if the seed is directly above it. Furthermore, says the Mishnah, Afilu hivricha, even if the layered vine, which was under the ground, was traveling within either a dried out gourd, which is one of the ways of doing it, or through a tunnel. Guys, with God willing, and I thank you, Gabriel Weiss, next Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, we're going to go to a vineyard within an hour of LA. I wanted to do it Sunday, but this manager who's the big maven can only be there during a weekday. And we're going to ask him about all these dinim. It's mamash, the perfect timing. Okay, in other words, we're not asking him, God forbid, to confirm the halachas. We want to know, first of all, whether the manager knows what he's talking about. And number 2, we want to know whether nature currently is aligned with the emes. Sometimes, because of galus, God made the world one way, and because of Mapnei Chato'enu, everything got distorted. But afilu hivricha b'dalasa b'silain, nevertheless, you may not do it. Why? Because the root will go through the gourd. Now, guys, a gourd, I understand. A gourd is something natural. So when the gourd is under the ground, it becomes soft. A pipe, all pipes. So the Gemara clarifies. Hold on. Hadad the Tamar. Yeah, our Mishnah is speaking about Silan Shalchedes. Our Mishnah is speaking about a earthenware pipe, which is taka porous, which is weak, relatively weak, and a root will go through it. It's amazing. I know that in the modern world you have cement. Sometimes you see greens coming above the cement, like a little weak plant. What we think is weak is a lot stronger than what we think is strong. So it can go through a cheres, but aval b'silon shall avar. But if you have lead, then ain't it tzarech. We don't say that. Now, what do we say? The Gemara doesn't say. Why am I asking? Because the Mishnah in the next case is by the rock. By the rock, we learned you don't need 3 tvachim, but you need to have 3 fingers of earth. With the lead, I don't know. Let's go back. This was only spoken when you're speaking about a solid rock. There, a solid rock, however it's defined, you only have to have 3 etzbois. When you have a weak rock, whatever that will be halachically called a weak rock, it will be like the silon shalcheres. Then pas pace, it will crumble, and you have to go back to the rule of 3 tvachim. Nikud. Okay, and now the Gemara is going to focus, and let's go until the next Mishnah. That we're going to focus on the second part of the Mishnah. Second part of the Mishnah is based on a premise that's implied in the first. The implied premise of the first is that the avodas hakerem begins not from under the ground. It begins from where it breaks the surface. But the Mishnah now qualifies that. Not exactly always from where it breaks the surface. From where it breaks the surface and goes up vertically. Because if you have a knee in the vine, like I explained, it broke the surface. But for whatever reason, this vine decided it's not going up. It's going on the ground. It's hugging the ground. And then it goes up wherever you only count the 6 tvachim or the dalad amas from that wherever, from where it goes up. That's huarkuva shebegefen. Bahai says, now the Gemara wants to limit it. This is only true is if when it broke the surface, it did not go up at all. That means to the naked eye, you won't notice it because it's hugging the ground. Bahai kishe'ein harishain nira. The rishain, we're going to call the rishain that which is connected to the root underneath it. The first emerging from the ground is called the rishain. If it travels on the ground and it goes up later, we're going to call that the sheni. So if the rishain is not visible at all because it's on the ground, then we only care from where it goes vertical. What happens if it goes up? I'm going to use the word 1 inch. I don't know exactly 1 inch. 1 inch is not that much. 1 inch, less than a tefa. And then it goes for 4 amas, horizontal. And then it goes up. What then? The Gemara says you have now 2 avodas. It's not one or the other. It's both. Nira, if the first trunk is visible, it's visible to the naked eye, then nois and shisha tvachim lakan and the shisha tvachim lakan. How great is that? How great is that? Then you have to have 2. And whoever has an art scroll, that's the picture on the top right, the top picture. In other words, if it goes up a little bit, the Mishnah still stands with the din of the knee. The knee, the second, also counts, but you cannot ignore the first. You have 2. When our Mishnah says you don't even have the first, that's because it's not nida. Breaks the surface, but it goes on the surface. And now I'll prove it to you. Says the Gemara, what's the naya? So we're getting a heads up already in the Mishnah Daf Samach Beis. The Basrei, because we learned in the next Mishnah what we call Perek Shvi, Halacha Beis, or what you're going to call in the Daf Samach Beis, the case that we mentioned in the introduction, that Hamabrich Shloisha Gefanim, if you only had 3 Gefanim, you did not have a Kedem, because you only had 3. And you, the farmer, took all 3 of them, and you layered them, and at some point, right, the offshoot was brought above the ground. The farmer does that. The farmer doesn't just stick it into the ground. The farmer bends it down. He puts it into a path under the ground for however much long the vine is. And then the farmer already penetrates the surface going up, milmato lamaila, and he leaves it there. So if this says the Mishnah that again that whenever the ikreim nirin means that the parent trunk is still there. You see, if all you have is one vine, and the whole vine you put under the ground, then you won't have the parent vine. But if you can look, whoever has the art school, look in the bottom picture, you're kidding, a grapevine has many offshoots. What really happens is that the main offshoot, they leave in the original location. They take one of the side vines and they put it under the ground. So now you have the original parent that's going horizontal, going up, and now you have the layered vine that's going under the ground and coming up at some point in the distance. So says the Mishnah that Rabbi Lazar, but Rabbi Tzadok says that as long as you have between the parent vine and the offshoot vine, the prerequisite shiyurim that we learned in the previous chapters, which is minimal 4 amas, maximum under 8 amas. Then you have now a vineyard because you have 2 rows. The parent counts and the offshoot counts. And we learned in the B'rais of Tana law, like we said, only regard to the forming of a vineyard. But when it comes to the laws of avodah, in other words, you always have to have 6 tvachim here and 6 tvachim over there. Even if, what's the naya? When does it not combine? Only when it comes to the laws of a vineyard. Which would mean, let's say, that it came above the ground less than 4 amos. Came above the ground less than 4 amos. So you don't have a kedem. But just because you don't have a kedem, the B'rais says it doesn't mean you only have to count 6 tvachim from one of them. No. Even when you don't have a kedem, but you have the parent vine that's visibly sticking above the ground, you have the offshoot that's visibly sticking above the ground. Let's say you brought it up 2 amos away. You don't have a kedem, but you have 2 vines. That means when you count the law of 6 tvachim, you don't only count it from the parent. You don't only count it from the offshoot. You count it from both. So therefore, the Gemara says it makes sense to say that in our Mishnah, when we have the din of the Arkuva Shebegefen, when does the Mishnah say you only count 6 tvachim from the one that's vertical, from the offshoot? That's only because the parent is not visible. Because when it broke the surface, it's stuck on the ground. But if it goes up a little bit, even though it's a little bit, you'll have 2, not 1, not either the parent or the offshoot. Like we have from the Braisa, you can have 2, even when you don't have a din of a kedem. Gavaldik. We'll stop over here.